We're back now with Bruce Campbell for the StoneCastle Investment Management Cannabis Weekly Wrap-Up. Bruce, how are you doing today?
Doing well in this challenging market.
Yeah, it has been quite the brutal week here in the cannabis space. What is driving this brutality?
I mean, I think there's a couple of things, above and beyond kind of what we've talked about in the fact that, the vapes issue and then some of the other macro issues. But I think that, some of the headwinds this week have been, when you saw the Green Organic Dutchman come out and talk about needing more money and not being able to raise it. I think that was a concern with the markets. And then the Hexo news from yesterday, where they came out and basically removed their guidance for next year and lowered what it was for this year. I think that certainly spooks the market a little bit as far as how to put those numbers into perspective for 2020.
Yeah, it's like the 1-2 punch. Okay, what about all of the outdoor grows? How has that affected the downdraft in market valuations?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if it's affected the valuations to any great length, but right now most of the outdoor grows are at the point where they're getting ready to harvest or have just pulled off those harvests. We were actually at one on Wednesday where they're going to start harvesting next week, and it was pretty impressive to see. I mean, the big thing is that their cost is going to be super low. They think sort of in that 25 cent per gram range versus I think the lowest that we've seen kind of from any of the big producers is kind of in that 65-75 range, and there's lots sort of in that $1 to $2.50 range. So that's probably having a bearing on you're going to have a bearing on prices and then also supply, which we talked about in the past about how much supply there is coming.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Canadian legal prices keep dropping relative to the black market. How much of a headwind is that going to shape up to be in 2020?
Well, I mean, that's something that I don't think anyone should be surprised to see, because at the end of the day, that's what the government, when they set out this program, wanted to see, right? They wanted to eliminate the black market. And the only way you can really do that is through testing and quality of product, and then through price, because the two still have a fairly wide variation between where they are now, but we're starting to see that go in the right direction. That's obviously great for the consumer and for the market as a whole, and for moving that black market to legal. I mean, where it becomes more challenging is for that producer who is now got a high cost of production, and that's where we're really going to see things get blown out probably in the next 18 to 24 months, when you actually have producers who can come in with a low cost in that sort of 65 or 75 or 80 cents per gram, versus the guys who are 250, especially if now they're selling it to the provinces for $4, but if that drops down to selling it to the province for $2.50, $3, there's going to be a big squeeze on margins.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the retail consuming public of cannabis is so price sensitive that they're willing to patronize the black market in favor of the legal market due to price?
Well, certainly if you consider sort of the legacy market, that I think would be the case for sure. The new market, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case, because people aren't used to trying to figure out their own supply. They know to go to a cannabis store that's been set up by someone who's regulated with the government. So they're not going to be as price sensitive, I wouldn't imagine. And then the other thing is that once you get sort of down the road with this vape issue and testing and quality, that's also going to probably dictate that people probably aren't as price conscious if they're going to potentially have something that's going to harm their health versus something that is sort of not guaranteed but been regulated to be safer.
Sure. Okay, let's talk a bit more about Hexo's guidance revision. They're suggesting that revenue for the fourth quarter is going to be less than they had projected, and also they've reduced their expectations for next year. To what extent would you say that was to be expected, and to what extent would you call that a big surprise?
Well, I think the magnitude of the number was probably the big surprise. You top that with the fact that their CFO left on Friday, and that obviously doesn't help or really is a twofold contributing factor to this. I don't think anyone should be surprised that the numbers are a little bit slower than what we had expected, given the fact that you look at the two biggest probably consuming provinces are Ontario and BC, and they're the two that have the worst rollout as far as having the number of stores available. I think there's still only 12 in BC here, and the number is I think around 24 in Ontario. So they really need to ramp those stores up to give access to people to be able to buy.
Sure, sure, okay. And then TGOD also was, well, obviously slammed with by their announcement that they were having trouble getting funding to finish their projects. But also the BMO cut their target price to 70 cents. So I guess that's all combining to really drive TGOD shares lower. Do you think that's something they're going to be able to recover from?
Well, I mean, I guess if they can figure out a way to do a financing here, then or get financing, that can certainly help them. But yeah, it certainly puts them behind the eight ball, especially when they came out to the market and basically at least insinuated that they had funding for the whole Quebec project, and then now they've come out and said, wait, actually we don't, and we're not sure if we're going to be able to secure it. So it certainly puts things up in the air, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this. And I think that's why the market sold off the way it has, is because now when you start to have some of these issues happen, people start to wonder, like, well, is it my company that I hold that's separate from these companies that could have the same issue?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. We're starting to come into a market where anybody who manages to pull off a financing is worth a second look just by virtue of achieving that. And VFF pulled off a $25 million bought deal financing. How remarkable is that in this market?
Yeah, I mean, they had to obviously do it at a pretty big discount, but the fact that the stock was higher than, closed higher than where the bought deal was done the day it was done is pretty impressive in this market. You didn't see that necessarily, anytime in the last 6 months. So the fact that they did it, the 2-day drop was still fairly significant, but you have to, sort of take your hat off to what they've done and been able to raise that money.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And what do you make of the new chairman of the board for Canopy Growth Corp?
Well, it's one of those things that, if you go back sort of 6 to 12 months ago now, a lot of the participants in the industry said, we really need the industry to kind of button itself up from where it was. A lot of the companies were still being managed by the entrepreneur who had the vision and started this. And so now you're actually seeing, what we would sort of refer to as professional managers. This is somebody that's coming in from Constellation that's, going to take control now, and they're going to be guiding the ship. So, that it's going to take probably a couple of quarters, but, cost control is going to be an issue and going to be a concern and going to be something that they work on. And then, obviously building out those products and building out the market the way that we expected they would is, going to be the second thing. And then the third is, they probably start to try to monetize what they've been doing from an international perspective as well. So it'll be really interesting to see what they can do and where things go. But, I think this is probably the sign of the times going forward, is that you'll see more of these type of managers step into these cannabis companies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To what extent do you think that the vapes situation is going to continue to constitute negativity for the cannabis sector?
Well, until we see some type of actual finalized ruling from Health Canada, it's going to be an overhang. There's still lots of speculation. I've talked to a number of people this week who, some people think, oh yeah, they're going to delay it. Other people think, no, with sort of where it's at now, they won't. But as long as it's an overhang, that's going to spook people. And then in the U.S., obviously, with the fact that you've seen some bans, that's that's going to hold some people back as well. So we probably need something, sort of more clarified, and that probably comes with data and some sort of testing.
Right. And do you concur with the idea that the legal market is the best place to advance the understanding of what is driving the health issues in vapes?
Well, just from what I've been able to read, it certainly seems that there's a differentiation. It seems like, several of the black market products are the ones that, contain this vitamin E acetate or had the, the pesticide that's creating the hydrogen cyanide.
Right. In general, Bruce, how does a cannabis investor who wants to still be a cannabis investor, how do they protect themselves and position themselves for the market that we're in right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the big thing is, high grading your portfolio and always knowing exactly what you own. I think that's important, especially nowadays. Taking a look at who's got cash in their balance sheet is probably a big thing because anyone who needs to raise money here, it's going to be more difficult going forward.
Okay. And so, I mean, I've had people asking me, should I be selling out all of my cannabis stocks now? And, I'm not an investment advisor, so I don't give them advice. It's like, it's not as if this, would you categorize this as the dot-com meltdown of cannabis stocks?
Certainly it feels that way in some regards. The difference being that we have a market for this product that we didn't have with the dot-com. Like there was, if you think back to say somebody like 360 Networks who built all this fiber, but we didn't have anything that ran on the fiber. Well, we know there's this huge black market. The Canadian market's still estimated, I think, to be 7 billion in size if you conclude black and legal. So that's going to cross over. You just don't know when and how it happens. So the market's there. These companies there's going to be leaders and there's going to be ones that, fall by the wayside. But the big thing is trying to figure it out. But the market's there, so we know that.
Right. Okay, great. Well, that's it for this week's StoneCastle Investment Management Cannabis Weekly Wrap. If you want to learn more about StoneCastle Investment Management, go visit them at stonecastlefunds.ca. Bruce, thank you very much for your participation as usual.
Yeah, hang in there, investors.
You bet. Thanks.